Welcome to the From Concealment Podcast, the show for firearm enthusiasts who like to shoot, train, carry, and compete. Get ready for some shooting and sight, firearm and accessory reviews, and of course, insight on concealed carry. And now, broadcasting from behind enemy lines in the From Concealment studio, it's Pete Mitchell and Dan Sams.
Hey, Freedom Nation, this is Pete Mitchell.
And I am wearing a tinfoil hat.
Woo! Let's bring out the tinfoil hat.
It's happening, man. It's so great. Oh, it's going to go down.
How much fraud can possibly be done in one election?
It's so great. I almost have respect for it right now at this point because they managed to pull off some flagrant stuff. Before the election, there was
Sure.
the registering dead people to vote in Broward County. They were finding, ballots thrown away all over the place, buried in fields. That's just, it is. We're talking about not conspiracy theory sites. We're talking about CBS News and whatever, on their website, sharing that kind of stuff. So it's not a question of whether or not fraud happened. Was it enough to swing the election? It probably was. Right.
Wait a second. Wisconsin had an 89% voter turnout, which is the highest of anyone in the nation. No one else is even close to that. And let's just say that Joe Biden is no Obama. Obama had this magnetic personality, and you're trying to tell me that Joe Biden, Dementia Joe, got that many people out to vote? Come on. That doesn't even pass the smell test.
No pun intended. There's so much crazy stuff, and I'm hearing from you can't put too much stock in this, but the friend of a friend thing, where somebody that was volunteering at a poll, right, who was witnessing somebody marking ballots so that they were invalidated, right? Watching somebody invalidate ballots, got caught, got arrested, right? We've got those kind of things. There's a video that was out the other day of somebody going into a basement of a polling center where people are counting, and he's like, "Why are you counting down here? The legal place to count is upstairs. Why are you down here?" And he's not being a jerk. He's like, "I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I'm a poll watcher or whatever." And they're like, "Well, I you should ask who's in charge." He's like, "All right, well, who's your supervisor?" And what was his name? They wouldn't give him any information, and he's like, "This is not okay." So crazy stuff, man.
But what I got to be honest about, I'm kind of impressed at the level of fraud.
Oh, they're so good at it.
They had millions of ballots on the sidelines. All of a sudden, what was that one in Wisconsin? It was 300,000 votes. All of them went to Biden. They just miraculously showed up in the middle of the night when everyone had already left. It's are you serious? How dumb do you think we are?
Precisely 300,000 votes dumb, apparently, or whatever.
Apparently.
Yeah, I love the graph where it's Trump, Biden going up, and then Biden. That's the fun of watching 538, which is a data processing and polling organization, right? And they lean liberal, but if you're going to call in somebody that's semi-objective from liberalism, that's who you're looking at. And it's their graphs that are looking all nuts like that. And so when people are we're just following conspiracy theory sites, and I'm like, it's 538. It's it's your guys' stuff.
Right.
This is your liberal polling site. So very entertaining. I keep hearing anecdotal stuff about crazy things going on. And then some of the explanations when they're explaining that anomaly of all of a sudden he gets however many 100,000 votes, the articles I'm reading make it look more suspicious. Have you noticed that? Where they're "Oh no, this is not what's happening here," and they start to explain it, and you're like, "What?"
I love how Facebook keeps trying to give you all this. Now let's explain to you how this is being done. Yeah. On every time you mention the election, they automatically populate this. We're going to explain to you why everything is totally legit and fair right now.
Yeah.
It's
in Shakespeare where it's "methinks the lady doth protest too much." It's kind of when and then one of the articles I looked at was why there totally wasn't fraud or something like it was a flagrant, like there totally wasn't fraud. There couldn't have been fraud. And then that's the title of this article. And I'm like, come on, man.
Right.
Oh,
what's funny is like, I actually get to take the stance, and it's only because I'm here in California where my vote doesn't count anyway as a conservative. So I didn't vote for Trump because I'm like, it doesn't matter. I'm in California. My vote doesn't count. So I'm not going to vote for Trump because I don't really like the guy. Yeah. But if I'd lived in like frickin' Pennsylvania or, Ohio, that would be a tough one for me. I probably would have voted for Trump, not because I like the man. I do like what he did for the economy big time. And I would, I would probably have voted for him because better than Biden. But I'm in California. My vote doesn't count. So I didn't. So I get to take the stance. I didn't even vote for the guy. And I'm looking at this going, this is crazy. This is so not legit.
Yeah. Well, I got into an interesting discussion. A friend of mine shared a post and essentially said, hey, like, I really don't like Trump, but if there's any concern of fraud, like, isn't it better that we let everybody look into this? Like, that makes sense that like we would check everything out, and that's good for the country, right? We get everything checked. And if it turns out that Biden won, then at least everybody can be like, well, cool. We checked everything out. No worries of fraud. And his comment is like, why would the Biden supporters have such an issue with like just checking the things out? Like, why is it a problem? And so a mutual friend of ours who has recently turned liberal and is annoying the heck out of me, he's like, well, you wouldn't say that if it had gone the other way. And I'm like, well, dude, you're questioning his motives. Come on. And so we start talking. He's like, well, there's my problem then is that there's no evidence of fraud. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Like, we do have evidence of fraud. Like, let's just be honest. Like, I don't like Trump, and I don't necessarily agree with all of his accusations about it. But like, and so I cited like several articles where like we know that there was fraud here, here, and here. And then he changes his story again. He's like, well, I don't like that he's assuming this particular fraud happened, and he's making accusations. And I'm like, well, okay, but won't you feel better when he looks like an idiot later? When it's like, when we check this out, like, why are you fighting it? And so then he's like, well, yeah, we should check it out. And so he looks, and so then I just stop. I'm like, dude, let's just pay attention to the fact that in a very short time, you have changed your argument about 4 times. And I cited all of them. And I'm like, help me understand, like, what's the standard that you're judging all this by? And he just says, like, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. Have a good night.
Wow.
And I'm like, hey, and I'm like, dude,
I can respect that.
I respect that, and we had it, and it remained cordial, but this is where I'm struggling with the people that do not think rationally about either candidate. Right. And especially when it's like, okay, I really don't like Trump. And then for crying out loud, Biden has a plan to kill babies, take away your freedom, and do a whole bunch of wicked stuff. So I'm like,
and let's face it, like, I don't know if you know the casino odds on if he's going to make it till January 20th or not to actually take the oath of office.
I know.
I hate to say this, but I'd rather have Dementia Joe than Hitler Harris as president.
Oh, 100%, man.
But we all know she's going to end up being president because he's not making it through the first term.
Yeah, she's gonna Article 25 it, man. Like, I mean, that's what. Like,
I wonder if that was already the plan. Like, I wonder if he knew and he was like, I'm just going to win this because we got to get it away from Trump, and then I'll step down so they don't have to Article 25.
Oh, man, on just the information that we have publicly of his weird, crazy sayings. Like,
I can't tell you how many times I've said your line, this is elder abuse, to run him for president, which is the funniest line I've ever heard. Win this because we got to get it away from Trump, and then I'll. Someone's going back and re-listening to us.
Sorry, I was trying to share us again. I'm sorry, it does that every time. Yeah, I always try to jump on there and invite people, and I messed it up. No, I think you're right. I think they're going to Article 25 him, or he's going to step down or something, but it's not good. I'd rather have him than Harris.
I know.
By far, man.
Because Harris, man, that woman is just, I honestly think she's just completely corrupt. Biden's corrupt too, but she's corrupt like in a vindictive way. To let nice innocent people be on death row because you don't want to lose, like that's a whole different level of evil. That's like a Disney villain evil, right? Yeah.
Joe Biden is the nice guy corrupt, right? I mean, he's evil. He's a bad guy. He's all totally corrupt, but he's so nice, right? So like, I still have a big problem with him, but I'm like, I mean, if it was me talking to him right now, I'd be like, yeah, you're a murderer. But, let's have a beer and like,
come on, man.
Yeah.
Come on, man.
Come on, man. But with Kamala Harris, I'm like, man, this lady's scary, dude.
I know.
Like, stare into a mirror and like find out where the princess is evil.
I wonder if she has a reflection. Who knows?
Boom, boom, boom.
Who knows?
Yeah. So here's man, there's so many things here. There's just so much. And
which is funny, if you think about it, I would have much rather had Pence than Trump, right?
Yeah.
And it's like the complete opposite. I'd rather have Biden than Harris. Like, it's totally the opposite.
So, man, I'm thinking about this, and I want to say this cautiously because I don't want to make an unfair accusation. But I'm thinking about the things that the liberals say about Trump. And some of it's his own fault. He says ridiculous things. He does come off awful, and we dislike him. Trust me, there's all kinds of legitimate problems with him. But it's interesting that, like, when you look at his actual plan, like, very few executive orders compared to many others, right? Limited a lot of our violent and tense conflicts, like relationships with even like freaking North Korea and Iran are better now. Like, that's like, it sounds crazy, but this is the guy who should be the saber rattling, let's go get him, seems to be less so related to that. And even like how he's, he polled higher with blacks and Hispanics because he's done some things that they've considered positive. So it's wild to me. You have Kamala Harris, who really did put a lot of black people in jail for nonviolent crimes, really did keep a guy on death row because she didn't want to lose. Like, she's the one who comes off as the quote unquote law and order. And, like, the things that normally people will say are dog whistles for racism when Republicans do it, she's actually done, right? She's actually done these things. Trump's only been accused of them. And so it's really mind-boggling to me to kind of look at that and say, like, well, Trump's a jerk, but like, are you paying attention? Like, she's actually done the things that the Republicans are being accused of. And so I'm having a hard time with the irrationality of it all, man.
Right.
Really. Yeah. So anyway, that's just what it is. So we had a listener was asking about the Biden gun plan. Should we talk about that a little bit?
I think we should. And I think we should also all keep in mind that one of the I believe they're not going to stop counting or finding votes until they've retaken the Senate as well. Like, that's their game plan.
Yeah.
If the Republicans can keep the Senate, and I mean, keep in mind the Republicans are just as corrupt as the Democrats, so they can be bought off. The problem is you only got to buy one or two of them to all of a sudden get your illegal stuff pushed through. I mean, I am so grateful that we got that new Supreme Court set up, because as long as they don't, all of a sudden decide to change how many people are on the Supreme Court and get it stuck in their favor, we stand a chance of keeping this thing, under control. But anyway, with all that being said, I mean, the whole, looking at Joe Biden's gun safety. In fact, wasn't that what they call it? Yeah, it's joebiden.com / gun safety, as if that's got anything to do with anything.
You know what would be really awesome if he was selling like safety selectors for ARs on that page. That would be awesome.
Dude, you just gave me what I'm going to do when I run. I'm going to have a gun safety. I'm going to set up an affiliate page for like safety
gun
selectors.
Man, yeah.
Here's the first line. Joe Biden knows that gun violence is a public health epidemic. It just starts off pissing me off.
Yeah, it made me mad from the very first word.
And he's taken on the National Rifle Association on the national stage and won twice.
Whatever. I'm like, that's like saying, I played my 4-year-old at Texas Hold'em and won twice. Like, the NRA doesn't even play. They're children. Like, Firearms Policy Coalition doing something at least. Anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read off some of these things, and I want to get your opinion, and I'll throw mine in as well. So we were talking about this right before we started recording. Hold gun manufacturers accountable. What does that say to you?
That means that they want to blame the maker of something for somebody how somebody used it. So, kitchen knives. Are we going to hold kitchen knives? I mean, are we going to hold Cutco responsible for when somebody steals stab somebody with one of their kitchen knives? Are we going to hold Toyota responsible for vehicular accidents or vehicular homicides? Are we going to hold the government responsible for freaking everything? It's not good, man.
It's ridiculous to think that you could all of a sudden blame the maker of something for how someone decides to use it. I mean, what about someone who kills their spouse with aspirin? Puts it into their drink, whatever, and so are we going to hold Bayer accountable for that?
Yeah.
Like, this doesn't even make any sense. You're going to hold someone totally unrelated for what someone else does. It's ridiculous. Yep. Next thing that Biden's got here on his website, this one's always funny to me. Get weapons of war off of our streets.
Yep.
What's a weapon of war? Because there's not a single military in the entire world that uses an AR-15. Not a single one. They never would. Like, it's ridiculous. It's semi-automatic. This is ridiculous.
Yep.
But
I want to know, like, when I hear weapons of war, I'm thinking of like artillery rounds. I'm thinking like, like nuclear weapons. I'm thinking of, atomic subs. I don't think AR-15s.
But that's what he means, and that's what the public believes. Oh, an AR-15 is a weapon of war. And they're thinking that because, one, a big, big thing, like, and I have a huge problem with this. Every time I watch a movie, and like, what was the one, Death Wish, the remake with Bruce Willis?
Oh, yeah.
I actually really enjoyed the movie because I'm a gun guy, right? So anyway, Bruce Willis, he ends up buying an AR-15 for home protection after everything that happens to him and his wife and his family. And of course, at the very last scene in the movie, bad guy breaks into his house. He busts out the AR-15, which is now fully automatic, and goes to town on the guy. And I'm like, that's not an AR-15. Yeah. Like, you're perpetuating this lie. And everyone now believes, well, AR-15s are fully automatic. It's not. It's not a fully automatic weapon. Until you drill that third hole. Until you get that coat hanger.
Yeah. Call that the coat hanger provision.
The auto-sear coat hanger. What an idiot that guy who was selling that on Amazon or whatever in the ATF came and got him. I'm like, dude, are you kidding me? Like, you can't do this. You're going to go to jail.
How about this next thing on the plan where he says regulate possession of existing assault weapons under the National Firearms Act? And he points out, he says that because of the NFA, essentially, he says, due to these requirements, such weapons are rarely used in crimes. So he essentially wants to extend all of the NFA regulations that we now have on fully autos and whatever. He wants to extend them to ARs. And I'm like, I actually talked to a liberal about this one time, and I'm like, do you understand one of the many reasons why fully auto weapons are not used in mass shootings? And like, I'm explaining how like a full auto, like you dump a mag so fast.
Yep.
And I'm like, we might actually see less deaths.
Yes.
If they were using fully auto. And I'm like, you don't see fully auto because, first of all, it's unnecessary for their purposes. It's not actually going to do what they need it to do. And it's actually this. it's going to be a waste of their ammo. Like, I keep going back to, like, you have no idea what this is going to work like. And, yeah, they're like, oh, well, that's interesting. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's just like, leave me alone. So,
but I love that regulate possession of existing assault. So in other words, you want me to now re-register everything I got.
yeah.
And that includes the 80%ers, which I don't have here in California.
Yep.
No, I'm just kidding. I don't have any. But like that's a huge problem. Like, what comes before confiscation? It's registration.
Yeah.
Like, they need to know who's got what.
Well, and it's built in here. Like, he already mentions the wanting to do the buybacks. Like, they want to require you to pay the taxes on, get the tax stamp or do the buyback. And so, and they're making it so, depending on the language, and people are interpreting it different ways, but because he wants to put the same kind of taxes and tracking on the standard mags, as well as on the gun. Theoretically, like, if you own an AR, you have to put a $200 tax stamp on it, and then you own 5 mags. Now, you're doing $200 for each of those. You're at $1,200 in taxes right out the gate, right? And he's not going to end there. He's going to tax every little bit of it. And the whole goal is going to be to make it financially impossible to own it, which was
the original intent, by the way, of the NFA.
Ultimately, the NFA, I mean, that's what was happening initially. And they start jacking with the supply and demand there. And that's why, like, it's going to cost you $12,000 plus if you want to buy a Mac 10, because it had to be one that was made before 1986, or 95 or whatever it was. I think it's 86.
I think it's 86.
Yeah, that kind of mess. And so they're going to jack with the supply and demand, and they're going to make it a mess. So I had somebody who was really freaking out this week. One of our listeners was like, man, what do I do? And my response is always, man, if they're putting the screws to you to that level, it means it's time to use it, man.
It's time to buy more. Buy more if you can. Buy more ammo if you can. I mean, ammo is the tough thing to get right now. I don't know what prices are doing out there in Ohio, but my buddy who I just helped buy a gun, it cost him, I believe, just over 70 cents a round for 9mm. Like, that's
crazy.
That's crazy.
Yeah, we're running out of stuff. Yeah.
How are you going to practice when it's costing you 70 cents a round? That's freaking incredible. That's
crazy expensive.
Yeah.
Well, and then, man, we're talking gun stores are getting emptied out.
Yeah.
So we're trying to make plans for Black Friday, and we're like, what's it going to look like after the run that we're already starting to experience? And getting guns in is tricky. So we're making plans. We're going to have some special stuff for Black Friday, but man, it is tricky in the gun industry right now.
You know what I think is interesting? So there's a gun store near me. It's open part-time because the guy's got a regular day job. And I honestly think this guy is brilliant for what he's done. So in California, there are no private party transfers. Like, I can't buy a gun off my buddy next door unless I take it to a dealer. The dealer's got to run the background check and has to hold on to it for 10 days. So what Biden is pushing for nationwide, we've already got here in California and had it for, I don't know, 5 years, 8 years, something like that. And you would be insane to purchase a gun any other way here in California, because in California, it's not worth it. It's not worth violating the law, because you're going to go to jail for a long time, like 10 years, which then you're losing all your gun rights forever. I mean, it is not the place to be screwing around with the laws. Yeah. So anytime I buy or I sell through private party, I got to go into a gun store. So here's what this guy is doing, and it's brilliant. He's selling guns on consignment. So if I have a firearm that I want to sell, I can take it into his store. He's going to sell it. And of course, because it's private party, they can place the price at whatever. And because you can't buy guns, you can place the price at whatever. He gets 20% of that. But he now has more inventory to sell. So like when I go to his shop, he's got more guns than everyone else. Now they are expensive. Like he was selling a Glock 17 Gen 5. And as soon as they said Gen 5, I'm like, oh, that's private party, because you can't buy it from a dealer. But he's not selling it as a dealer. He's selling it as a private party. So he's got the private party over here and the private party over there. He gets 20% commission. And it was $1,750 for a Gen. I'm not talking about a tricked out Gen 5. I'm talking about a stock Gen 5 Glock 17.
Man, that sucks.
But he gets $350 or $325 if he sells it.
He's making the money.
Because he's getting to, and I'm like, this is actually brilliant. He's following the law to the letter. But that might actually be a way to get more gun sales. People like me who have got a lot of guns and are like, hey, I don't mind getting rid of a few of them that I'm never going to use. Well,
I'm telling people, I would tell our listeners right now, especially if you're nearby, head into your gun store. Maybe head into our gun store. Gun stores know that there's a run happening. We've been on a 7-month run effectively, right? And so now we've got end of the year stuff. We've got the election thing. So if you've got a gun that you're not that excited about and you wouldn't mind getting, $100 for it, a couple of $100 for it, maybe even trade for an upsell, man, I'm going to tell you right now, this is a great time, especially before Black Friday, to get in there and see if you can, sell or trade your used gun with them. Because I tell you what, man, the panic buyers, they don't care. The panic buyers are like, I just want something that goes bang. Yeah. So right on. He's got a good business model, man. I'm interested here.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually was like, this guy is brilliant for thinking of that. And I heard there's another place in Lake Forest, which is really too far for me. I don't want to drive that far. And he's only charging 10%. So,
Well, I think we should talk about this a little bit, because let's facing facts, like this Biden plan is not a good one. And he is promising some executive order. We know Kamala Harris back in like April was promising, there was a USA Today article where she was promising she was just going to use an executive order to try to take guns. Like she was flagrant about it. Now, it's going to give them a hassle. But thinking worst case scenario, and I'm not advocating for this, I'm just acknowledging the reality. In a worst case scenario where they're going to do, forced compliance for buybacks and they're going to start going door to door. First of all, they don't want to do that, right? Because really quickly, this turns into Afghanistan.
Yes.
Right. And so I want you to think about,
especially when you start knocking on vets' doors, right?
Well, this is exactly right. So Joe Rogan actually had a comment about this. He's like, you realize that like the veterans that don't just talk about violence, they know violence.
Right.
They risk their lives to preserve our freedoms, and you're going to come and take them. They're ready to go, and they know what they're doing. And so I've also mentioned, I'm like, let's just think about how, like, you ever talk to a guy who was in Afghanistan or Iraq during, the worst parts of the war. What they hated was going on patrol. Like, you never knew, because almost every time you're out there and some guy who's made some improvised explosive device blows up the truck in front of you or blows up your truck, they don't want to do patrol. Right. And then you got to go to these houses and whatever. And you never know when somebody's got something bad planned for them. That's in Afghanistan, where there are a whole heck of a lot less guns. Right. Or in Iraq. Right. And by the way,
I don't know. Are there a whole heck of a lot less?
Well, there's less people.
I know they're allowed to have fully auto AK-47s.
Yes.
I mean, why aren't we? They are.
Yeah. What the heck? For crying out loud, our government gives them to them.
I know.
But what I'm thinking about is, let's imagine like they're sending a couple of cops or maybe a SWAT team of like 6 or 8, right? It doesn't take many times coming to a door where somebody's ready for them, right? And think about like in a red flag scenario, like you could red flag yourself. Like a couple of vets could get together, red flag themselves and be waiting, right? I tell you what, man, it does not take very many guys in a SWAT stack getting shot from behind before they don't want to go and do any more door-to-door checks, right? the demoralization that happens. I am not advocating this. I'm just stating the reality is we got a whole lot of vets that do not give a crap.
Yeah.
And so just paying attention, if it comes to that, it's going to be real bad for our country, but they're going to have to rethink things really quick. Now the escalation of that is like, well, are they going to argue for bringing in the UN troops? And then that makes it a whole party for all of us, right?
Yeah, because you got foreign soldiers on my soil.
Oh yeah, this is the dream, man. Like bring them in. Like let's.
I don't know that it's the dream, man. I don't want war. I certainly don't want war on our own soil. That's for sure, man.
No, that's true.
Yeah. But I mean, if it starts to pop off, I'm afraid it's going to catch like fire.
Oh yeah.
And that's the whole thing. It's kind of like, the shot heard round the world, right? The shot that started off the American Revolution. They needed that first shot. They needed someone to take the first shot, and no one wanted to take it. Someone takes it. No one knows who it was, but it was probably some guy who was just like, screw this crap. We're going. And that's literally what started the American Revolution. Mm-hmm. If that happens again, man, I don't look forward to that. I certainly do not want that kind of thing here in America, because to me, that's like officially America's dead.
Yeah. So, well, here's what I would say. I don't want that either. But the alternative that we're facing right now, I want even less. And
no, I'm with you. I'm hoping that we can preserve the Constitution, we can preserve the rule of law, and stop all of that crap, and just like let's like here in California, our governor got sued because everything he's doing is unconstitutional. He's not following the U.S. Constitution. He's not following California's Constitution. And unfortunately, the two guys who sued him, they were like two of the only Republicans in our state legislature. And so the state legislature didn't back them, right? It was literally these two guys on their own, whereas the other states where they've sued their governors, the legislators have backed him and said, no, he's not following the Constitution. We're the ones who get to make laws. He gets to enforce them. He loses anyway. And like one of the big things, and this was kind of the big joke, right? He made everyone a mail-in ballot. Like he changed elections for 2020, made everyone a mail-in ballot. And the judge said that was illegal. He couldn't do it, but we can't change that for 2020. It's too late. It's got to be changed for the next one. So he's like, whatever. He doesn't really care. Part of his defense, can you believe this, man? Part of his defense was, well, there's an obvious pandemic going on, so that's why I did this. You need to allow it. And oh, by the way, I had two people from the majority party of the legislature tell me I was doing everything good. Therefore, you need to allow it. Like the rule of law has gone away completely in California. And unfortunately, we're so liberal here, no one cares. Like everyone's just like, oh yeah, no, he's saving us. He's the savior. Like literally, my sister thinks that this guy has saved us from the pandemic. And it's like, are you kidding me? He's a dictator tyrant. And if we can get away from that and back to what the law actually says, which is legislator makes laws, executive enforces it, courts either uphold it or say it's not constitutional. If we can get back to that, that's how I want to solve this problem. I don't care that Biden's president. I mean, I do, but I don't at the same time, as long as we follow the rules that we all agree to, or that our forefathers, I should say, actually agreed to.
Yeah. The thing is, and I agree, I hope we can have a turnaround like that, but I do fear that we're past it. I mean, like we're just so, you look at, just the Second Amendment. I mean, we're a gun podcast. Second Amendment alone, like the fact that the NFA exists, the fact that the ATF exists, like we're already so far past it. And our culture has gotten used to it, uncomfortable with it at times, but used to it.
Yeah.
And the same thing with illegal search and seizure. Like we have FISA courts that basically are a rubber stamp for them, data mining every American citizen. Like we're so far beyond the constitutional rule of law And like what we had in California, where like they get away with it, and they've been getting
and no
away
one
with it
cares.
so long.
And no one cares.
Well, and the people who care, I mean, there are people who care, but nobody cares that they care, right? Like,
it's such a small amount that care. Like, that's why, I say being a conservative in California, my vote doesn't count. I think in this election, like, first of all, Orange County, where I live, used to be like totally red. I don't think we even have any congressional members who are Republicans anymore in Orange County. Like, it's all blue. I mean, maybe there's one. I'm not even sure. It's certainly not mine. But it's like there's so few left, and those are the only ones who care. Because if you're part of that political party, you already have a different mindset. Like, you rely on government, you trust government, you think government is your savior. And so when government says, "Oh, we gotta close down everything," this last week it turned. Literally on Thursday, it was 90 degrees, 93 here in Los Alamitos. 3 days later, it's 63. Like, overnight, we went to winter. And that's winter for us here in California. You got to understand. I know everyone else is like, 63. Give me some of that. No, that's winter in California. None of us are prepared for 60-degree weather.
Yeah. So
all of these restaurants are now crapping their pants because they haven't been allowed to have people inside their restaurants. They've been having to do it outside, which is kind of ridiculous because now they're putting up walls around their outside eating area. So let me get this straight. I can eat inside so long as it's outside.
Yep.
And they're putting up heaters. And some, like my wife, she goes every week, she goes out with her best friend and they go to a restaurant. And she's like, yeah, it's kind of cold now. I don't want to sit outside at 5:30 at night when it's 50 degrees out. I know they got heaters, but it's cold. Like, this is Southern California. We don't do well in 55-degree weather. Like,
yeah, you guys aren't used to that. For us, we're like, man, 50 degrees, awesome. Let's get outside.
Right, but different here. And so all these restaurants are sitting there just crapping their pants, going, winter's here, and they haven't opened us back up. I'm sorry, but if I owned a restaurant at this point, I'd be like, screw it.
Yeah.
We're open, inside dining. Come shut me down. Come find me. I'm not paying your fines because I'm going to be out of business either way.
Yep.
So I'd rather go out fighting.
Oh, man. And it's all over, brother. Like, I'm looking at even here where it's not as harsh as it is over there. But we have a mall in the Cleveland area that actually was still thriving up to about a year ago. And so it was surprising. Like, a lot of malls, they're already dead. But you would go to this mall and it'd be like, man, all the major stores are still there. And they've got all the kiosk shops, and there's, it was happening. Like, all the little things were full. Like, there wasn't empty. Well, now COVID's hit and the mall has to close at 7.
Right.
So that means like, there's no going after work, right? There's no whatever. And then there's all the regulations. We just made a night of it Friday night and went out just with the family. We had dinner and we went and we're looking at it. I'm like, man, this mall that like we were here less than a year ago and like it's dead. It's depressing. And it looks like something from Soviet era. Because like, they clear out all of the tables. They clear out all the like the knick-knacky stuff that's just kind of around, kind of giving life to something like that. Everything is dead and empty, and like you go into the store, you buy the thing, you leave. There's no decorations. There's like, it's depressing. And Christy is like, this looks like Soviet bloc countries.
Dude,
and I'm
my
like,
wife said that today. She's like, when you see the kids line up for school, she goes, it's like we're living in communism. And I'm like, that's what they're pushing for. Yeah.
Well, here's what's kind of troubling, because like my wife gets discouraged on days. I get discouraged on other days. We tend to alternate who's down and who's not, because there are days where it's just heavy. Like, our hope is in the Lord. We are facing some pretty dark times though, right? And so lots of other good things going on. We're trusting the Lord, but every now and then we're like, whew, but what's going to happen with this? How are we supposed to plan? And the problem that I'm seeing is that your responses in let's say in depression are either to be really sad or really angry, right? That's where people go when they're like a person with depression. Like, they kind of go back and forth between anger.
Yeah, well, depression is really anger turned inward. So it makes sense to me.
So what happens is it feels better to turn anger outward.
Right.
right? And so you were talking about earlier about like, if this thing pops off, it's going to be a wildfire because everybody's depressed right now, right? Within reason. Everybody is down. Everybody's got that like tension, and it's just kind of been months and months and months and months and months of boiling. And now we're moving into a time where legitimate people, not just conspiracy theorists, are like, hey, this looks really shady with this election. And we'd at least like to get things cleared up, right? And then it didn't help that like right after Biden was declared the victor, that like the liberals swarmed the streets right? Like no social distancing, no anything. And so it's like,
well, they can't get it. Liberals can't get COVID.
Right. And I'm like, this is so freaking ridiculous. Like, it's obvious that you guys don't care about this virus. It was used to control us. And so you got a whole lot of people that are like, I'm sick of this crap, and that tension's building. And then it's going to take something relatively minor, strategically timed, for things to pop off. And I'm
afraid they're going to use that to control us even more. Like another mass shooting. Oh, now Biden's got, all the ammo he needs, pun intended, to take out more weapons.
Yeah. Yeah.
To reinstitute the assault ban.
We're expecting that. Here's the other thing. I don't always follow James Yeager because he can be a little brash for me. But James Yeager had a comment. He says, you realize that he did a really short video, and he says, there's too much of this non-compliance talk. He's like, non-compliance means you're not going to do anything. He's like, I don't need people to be non-compliant when it comes to gun laws. I need you to fight. And he was serious. And he says, because here's what's going to happen. They're going to start raiding people's homes. And what they're going to do, it's not going to be true most of the time, but they're going to say that they found child porn on that guy's computer, right? So that immediately nobody comes to his defense, right? And a little side note, it's really easy to put stuff on somebody's computer.
Sure.
Right? It's really easy. And so if
or you can say something's kiddie porn just because you got pictures of your niece or your nephew.
It's so easy for them to just throw something out there. So when we consider, like even guys like us, man, if I find out some guy's a pedophile, I'm like, he got what he deserved, right?
Right.
But we got to recognize that like there is an information game being played. And so we're going to have these situations where they're going to piggyback the gun confiscation onto something else. They're going to find some guy. They're going to demonize him. And then even guys that are pro-gun, we're going to be like, well, you kind of had that coming, right? And he's like, don't believe everything here, because they're going to make guys look bad that maybe aren't. And those kind of things are concerning. And all it takes is a planned mass shooting or an unplanned mass shooting. And
opportunity. Yeah, just take advantage of the opportunity.
Yeah. So that's what's up there.
Notice how like here in California, they were closing up shop on Election Day and the day after. Rodeo Drive, the famous Rodeo Drive and whatever it is, Beverly Hills or whatever.
Yeah.
Was closed up because of riots and protests. Oh. Notice they never happened when Biden wins, because the conservatives are like, we're not really going to go destroy anything. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, we don't have time to do that. We have to go to work.
Yeah. I mean, it was like all the riots that they were expecting. No, that's if Trump won, because it's all the liberal who are going to go out and riot and loot.
Yeah, it tells you something.
I don't respect liberals, man. I just don't. Anyone who wants to trample on my rights, I don't respect.
Well, who was it? I think it was Jeff Durbin maybe that made the comment. He's like, the party that is actively pursuing the murder of children in the womb cannot be expected to be a party that is going to be a party of peace or a party that's going to care anything about a free election. He's like,
the only problem that I have with that is I don't think you could blame it on the party, because that's a personal thing, and that shows your personal moral compass. And that's the reason why so many Republicans I don't respect either. Oh, because they have no problem with it. I mean, I honestly, I look at politicians, and so many of them have sex scandals, and we're finding out there's a whole, fund that Congress has to take care of their sex scandals. And I look at that and I'm like, so you guys are having the girls that you knock up go get abortions.
Yeah.
I know you are.
Well, that probably has something to do with the fact that when the Republicans had the White House and the Senate and Congress, they still didn't defund Planned Parenthood.
Oh, of course.
Right. They still, that stuff just makes me mad. Here's what I will say, because I know we're running short on time. This is the time where I'm going to get all preachery here, but my hope is not in our government. My hope is not in politicians. My hope is not even in my guns. My hope is in the Lord, and this whole thing could burn, and He's going to be all I have left, and I can still be joyful in that. So there are days where I get frustrated, where I get mad, but I am always coming back to, like, you know what? I believe in God's sovereignty. He's got a perfect plan. Things have been much worse than this in past church history. He is going to work out his good pleasure, as he always does. The other thing is, I keep coming back to, God has a history of giving really bad kings and leaders to countries that are wicked. We kind of have this coming. And that's just the reality of it.
Well, and that's why I said it kind of doesn't matter who wins, Trump or Biden. Either way, God gives you wicked leaders when your country's bad.
I know.
So,
yeah. Oh, man. So I will say also, exercise your rights, especially while you got them. Somebody got mad at me on Facebook yesterday because I said we should exercise our rights. Remember your Fifth Amendment rights. You don't have to incriminate yourself. Remember your Fourth Amendment rights, Third Amendment rights, like First Amendment rights. Like, don't associate with things.
Isn't the third soldiers can't have quarantine in your house, or they can't take over your house unless you let them, or something like that?
Yes, which is related to privacy, though. Also, like, there's a privacy built into that. But yes, that is the third. Fourth is the illegal search and seizures, right? And so I remind people, I'm like, man, if the cops come to your house and want to, like, come in and talk, like, you tell them to come back with a warrant. That's not disrespectful. That's the rule of law.
Yeah.
And somebody got mad at me because I was saying we should tell them to come back with a warrant. I'm like, that's how it's supposed to work, man. I'm not being rebellious by saying.
You have no idea what they can find in your house that is illegal. Like, they literally have created so many laws, you can't be compliant. You weren't even intended to do anything illegal.
Not to mention that, I mean, we've got police body cam footage of them, sneaking drugs onto somebody, and, like, this is what they do. They lie. They make their things happen. That's not to say that all of them do. Just, I'm starting to think maybe most of them do. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, man.
It's so funny to me. We're so not friends of the cops, but yet at the same time, I'm like, we need cops. This is my stance. I know you're more privatize even that, and I'm like, I would say needs to do that.
Even if we don't privatize them, can we at least have them do what they're supposed to do?
Well, here's I say the step in the right direction is, number one, end police unions.
Yep.
Get rid of the union, because that's the reason why the bad cops stay on the force. They can't get rid of them because of the unions. So get rid of the police union, and then secondly, get rid of pensions. Make it 401k like everyone else. You got to save your own money. No more of this. You're doing out 25 years, and then you get to draw for the rest of your life. Let's get rid of the pensions.
Yep. I agree. 100%. Yep. Well, and then I keep coming back to this. Is my thought is, I don't need the cops with a gun to show up when I'm reporting a financial mismanagement crime, right? Like, let's have a pencil pusher that shows up and takes the report, and we deal with that way, right? Let's have the nonviolent crimes dealt with in a nonviolent way, right? Mm-hmm. And, like, let's keep the cops reserved for times where we actually need them, and let's free them up so that they can, right? Because the truth is, in a self-defense situation, they're not going to get here in time. They're just not. Right. But if I've got them to come and enforce an intense situation, then okay, well, that's fine. Some of it is like, if we could just have them do what we actually need them to do and not all the other stuff. So anyway, all that said, man, check out learms.net, which we'll hopefully still have guns here in a couple of weeks because they're going fast. Actually, in seriousness, if you're going to buy a gun, you better freaking do it now.
If you're going to buy ammo, get as much as you can, as quickly as you can.
Yes. And by the way, it's going to be expensive, but get it. You might also seriously think about getting yourself an 80% lower right now. This is a real...
If you're in a free state, yeah.
Get yourself an 80% lower. You can get now, like, the billets, the 80% billets, like, you can get the really cheap ones for like $40. You get your $150 jig. Think about that. Like, you could mill out some of those things and really not be spending crazy money on it. So anyway, all that said, keep living free, brothers. It's going to be all right.
Remember, stay strapped or get clapped.
Amen.
That's just the deal, man. That's just it.
Yep. Yep. It's good stuff, Pete. Hey, you stay safe out there, man. Hey, you got backup now. Somebody I know might have finished.
Did he?
Yeah,
Nice.
I think he might have just hauled off and got the stuff to finish it off because I think he's excited. So, but you got backup if you need it.
But now he's got to take it out to the range, and he's got to practice on that.
Yeah, he's not going to be able to. He's not going to be able to afford to. So, well,
you have to at least go through at least a magazine. You need to know your firearm works.
Well, here's the thing. He needs to fire it for the sake of making sure it works.
Right.
He does have some training on those because of his other job.
Oh, cool.
He didn't have his own.
Sure.
He had one that you and I bought for him.
Oh, I got to find out what he used to do or does on his side job.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that.
Well, I'm not here on the air, but I'm curious now.
Yeah, he's a cool guy. He's got some interesting things. He doesn't just edit scripts for, the big man. It's good stuff. Yeah, we'll have to talk about that another time.
Cool.
He's a cool guy. Cool guy. All right, take care.
Guys.
Nation. Be safe.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the From Concealment Podcast with Pete Mitchell and Dan Sams. Be sure to tune in next week for more gun talk. Also, check out the From Concealment website for more shooting-related goodness at FromConcealment.com.